was just excited to have her on, and I was like, hey, what's been going on with, I know you guys mentioned we're going to be having an executive board for the fighters. Excited to hear about that. And I was expecting her to be like, yeah, I'm going to be on that board. I'm excited to be on it. But then it kind of turned, and she was like, actually, I'm revoking my endorsement of the PFA. And she actually had some pretty strong accusations, I would say, towards you and towards maybe some of the different conversations that you guys have had. Where are you guys at with that now?
Yes, she's no longer associated with the PFA. I'll tell you what happened.
Mm-hmm.
A while ago, as coming from the agent community myself, I realized that how indispensable the agents are as far as assisting the union in it, because they have their finger on the heartbeat of the industry.
Sure.
They know the things that are important, that are not important. I myself have been an agent advisor to the union, and what was one of the first things I wanted to do was establish an agent advisory board. So without mentioning names, I sought out agents who represent a bulk of the talent to discuss this with them. She didn't agree with me doing that. She thought that, for the most part, she has a very low opinion of agents. She thinks that agents are part of the problem and not the solution. And I told her I disagreed with her. I said that I'm not going to change anything. I said, yes, I agree with you that there are a lot of bad agents out there. I said, but there's a lot of good ones too.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the ones that I selected were good ones. And not only that, those agents also represent a bulk of the fighters, and I needed those agents to help guide me towards, please tell me the fighters that you know, that you have relationships with, that you consider to be sophisticated, passionate about this, take these issues to heart, that could help form an executive board of fighters for me as well.
Mm-hmm.
So they go hand in hand. So I am talking to these fighters, and I am talking to these agents regularly about establishing these boards. I've always maintained confidentiality. I've always said, you will never see my name mentioning another fighter's name or mentioning another agent's name in the press. I won't do that. I've been asked a million times, but I never say anything regarding that.
Mm-hmm.
She said that you breached the confidentiality by talking amongst these agents and these fighters and letting them know who each other is. Well, I said to her, if I'm going to have a board of fighters or if I'm going to have a board of agents, of course they're going to know who each other is.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? I want them to be able to work with each other in a spirit of cooperation. I want them to advise me. There's going to be times when we're going to have, conference calls. There's going to be times when we meet, in the same geographic location. So, of course, I got to let them know who's working with each other. She accused me of violating confidentiality and whatever, and she said she can no longer be with the PFA, and I said, fine, go ahead and go do your own thing. She told me that, and she's written a letter, actually, where she said that she thinks the union shouldn't involve professionals, that it should be a union just of fighters. And I think that that's completely ridiculous. I mean, look at who your opponents are in the collective bargaining arena. You're talking about Ari Emanuel, Patrick Whitesale, Dana White. These guys are sophisticated businessmen.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you don't see them jumping in the octagon. For the same token, I don't think the fighters should jump out of the octagon and into the boardroom. They should hire experienced professionals who could sit at the bargaining table, and therefore it would be a fair fight against the UFC and their new ownership.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I mean, there's more than one way to skin a cat, and if that's her view of the world, and that's what she's attempting to do right now by starting another union just of fighters, then, good luck to her.
Okay. So from what it sounds like, the relationship is strained, and you guys are you have difference of opinions on the, basically on your philosophy of how the union even should be formed. But with that, like you mentioned, she put out this letter today, and I actually just read it not too long ago, and she really wants to have. I think one of the things that she mentioned was, I guess my question is, did they know Leslie and the other members of the PFA? Did they know about the agent board that was being formed as well?
I told her that this is what I was doing, but I started it. I didn't consult her ahead of time and say, hey, Leslie, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to form an agent board. I didn't tell her that. I went ahead and I just started doing it. And then I told her, yes, this is what I'm doing. And I explained to her the reasons why. And she disagreed with it. And I said, that's fine. You can disagree with it, but This is what I know, what's proven to be successful in baseball, basketball, football, hockey. That's how those unions are run. They all have agent advisory boards. And I will not waver from that. And if the fighters choose at the end of the day not to vote me in because they don't think that's what should happen, then I'm fine with that. But my view of the world, how a successful union can run and combat the UFC owners, is by having an agent advisory board, is by having a fighter advisory board. And that's what I'm going full steam ahead with.
Sure. But I guess the question is it just when you made that decision, was it just you who kind of made it, or was it like a group of you, including maybe, because I know Lucas is pretty involved with the PFA, was it the leadership within the PFA to determine this is how we're going to go about this, this is the group of people that we've determined that we'd like to see be a part of this?
No, it was exclusively my decision. In fact, Lucas's view of the world is not the same with mine either. He's no longer associated with the PFA as well. Oh,
okay. Wow. When did that, I mean, we just spoke to Leslie a week ago, so did that happen recently?
Yesterday.
Yesterday. Wow. Okay. So when I thought of the PFA, I kind of thought of it as the trinity of Jeff Borris, Lucas Middlebrook, and Leslie Smith in a lot of ways. And so with those two parts out of the equation now, where do you feel like the PFA is heading? Because I think the part that's difficult is, as a fan of MMA, I'm very excited. I'm very excited for the talk of unions, for to have had you guys as like highly represented figures for a union, because you have so much experience and clout behind you. And I think with all of this news, it kind of it troubles myself, but I think it also troubles a lot of MMA fans at the prospect of having a union and having a union happen quickly.
Yes, I'll tell you. Unfortunately, what happens is my first reaction was I think it weakens the movement, because I think what Leslie's done, I mean, she obviously, her fighting career is less than stellar. She actually gets more attention from sticking her name out in the public domain as being involved with the union effort than she does for her fighting. And she sees that as her future, and I think that's a good idea, actually, because every fighter's, shelf life is limited. So I think that's a good idea, and especially because she's passionate about it. But, her views about how a union ought to be run, they don't coincide with mine. I think that the fighters will be confused by this initially, which weakens the movement. But then I think that, I think it'll be a little bit more transparent, and I think they'll see through it, and they'll understand that, I've been around the sports world for a long time. I'm very proud of everything that the baseball union's accomplished over the last 30 years, and I'd like to think that I've had a part in that. And I'd like to see that happen for the fighters. I think that the fighters are taken advantage of worse than baseball players, football players, hockey players have ever been taken advantage of. And it's been for quite a while now. And it looks like futuristically that will continue. So when something like this happens, Leslie's free to go in whatever direction she wants to go in. Lucas is free to go in whatever direction he wants to go in. I think it weakens the movement overall, but I think at the end of the day, at least the fighters that I've met and I've talked to seem to be pretty well educated on what's going on. They realize the need for a union, and that's what they support. The bad thing is that unlike most unions, it's not like there's some plant I can go down to at lunchtime and gather all 600 UFC workers during their lunch break and say, hey, I need you guys to fill out solicitation cards. This is what it's all about.
Right.
I mean, it would be a fantasy to have all 600 fighters in the same room at the same time and to be able to discuss this. So, you have roughly 500 of the 600 UFC fighters that are in the United States. You have another 100 of them that are scattered throughout the world. And so it makes it difficult, and the UFC knows this, to get them all in the same place at the same time to discuss these things with them. So I've been working very hard, meeting with fighters in person, talking with them over the telephone, so they understand what my platform is, where I'm coming from, and what my ideals are, and what direction I'm headed in, so they have a level of comfort with me.
So I guess, as looking at it, because I can see it from both situations, because I think I understand what you're saying when you say, most fighters probably in the boardroom environment or atmosphere, unless you're Conor McGregor, might not, stand up toe-to-toe with the Fertittas, or now, it's WME and Dana White. But I guess in terms of fighters feeling like this isn't going to be just run by agents, or these executive decisions aren't going to be made without their, input, what kind of confidence can they be given? Because, at the end of the day, Leslie is a fighter, right? And she does represent, or she represents fighters' interests. At least that's the perception, right? And so from a guy who's not traditionally an MMA guy, and who may be seen as an outsider of the sport, how do you go back to gain that confidence and that trust of the MMA fighters and the MMA community to say, hey, you guys, this is what's going on. This is obviously, being on the show is a great first step, but in addition to that, what's the plan?
Well, my body of work in baseball over the last 30 years, I think, speaks for itself, what I've done on behalf of the ball players. I'd like to do that for the fighters. I'd like to see the fighters gain some of the things that the baseball players have. I'd like to see them have medical insurance. I'd like to see their minimums raised. I'd like to see them have pensions. I'd like to see them have a collectively bargained for drug policy. Oh, I'd like to see them have a share of the licensing. Mm-hmm. The fact that they have to wear Reebok apparel and they don't have the opportunity to bargain with other companies is insane. Mm-hmm. So I'd like to be able to win, through collective bargaining and get some of those things for the fighters that the baseball players and football players and hockey players have enjoyed for many years now. Why should these fighters be the only group that's out there that doesn't enjoy these same benefits and privileges that athletes do in other sports?
Mm-hmm. Right. Yep. And I think that everyone would agree. Everyone would agree that that's exactly where the UFC is headed. The UFC fighters are headed, between different fighters speaking out, even Luke Rockhold saying, hey, I'm not being paid enough. You've even got, even with the situation currently with Conor McGregor's belt being stripped without his, it says that he relinquished, quote, his belt, but we haven't heard from him to actually confirm that is true, that it was a mutual agreement of him giving up his belt. So these different situations where UFC fighters are the UFC corporate's will is being imposed upon UFC fighters without them having appropriate representation in the sense of a union. So, no, I think everyone would agree.
I'll give you another scenario with Conor McGregor. I believe it was UFC 202 when they wanted him to come in from Iceland for a press conference, and he didn't want to do it. Mm-hmm. And then that was I think that was the rematch with Nate Diaz.
Right.
And Dana White went ahead and yanked them both off the card.
UFC 200.
Yes, and the fact that Dana White was able to do that unchecked, see, the way it would work in baseball is I'm not saying Conor was in the right or wrong. Mm-hmm. I'm saying that in the event of a dispute like this, there would be an arbitrator immediately appointed where the UFC would give their arguments and say, hey, this is why Conor must come in for this press conference from Iceland. Conor would go ahead and give his argument. His representatives would give the arguments as to why Conor doesn't need to come in. And then the arbitrator would make the decision as to whether or not he had to come in. Mm-hmm. Not Dana White being able to make this decision and dictate the result and then yank two guys off the card. Stuff like that, if there was some sort of mechanism in place, which is another thing I would like to get for the fighters, is some sort of dispute resolution mechanism in place, the way they do in every other sport. I don't even know if these things occur to Leslie. Yeah, and they shouldn't, because she should be involved in training. I know she's got a fight coming up December 17th, and I think that's what her focus ought to be in. I believe in a very high degree of specialization of labor. People should do what they're good at, okay? I've been a contract negotiator, and I've been a player representative for the last 30 years. I've been, an agent for the Major League Baseball Players Association. I think I know what needs to be done in order to get the fighters the same thing, and I'm working towards that goal.
Sure, yeah, and I think, it's funny because at the end of the day, I think most of the MMA community, we haven't even had this attention in terms of unions and people vying for the position of being, a union representative. So this is all new to the MMA community, right? And it's interesting. There's a pretty big learning curve, but I think perhaps maybe what people might feel as well is like, it's one thing to have a lot of that experience, which I agree with what you said, but even to come in in a way that's palatable. I don't know if that's the right word, but in a way that's easy for people to chew. And I agree with you what you said with having expertise. But I think too, people also probably want to just feel like, hey, this guy also respects what we've done so far, or even just understanding like how the sport, because at the end of the day, MMA is different than baseball and football and the other major league sports. And so even understanding, just I think as an MMA community, we're all just trying to understand what the options are, the strategy in which we're going, and then especially even as a fan base, as the MMA media, we want to be on board. We want to support. But at the same time, we really do want to understand what's going on and how we can support and what kind of input we are able to give, because it is different.
You know what's interesting about the media and the journalists that cover the MMA,
yeah,
as opposed to journalists, let's say in baseball that I've dealt with for a long time, the MMA journalists are very supportive of everything I've done regarding the union, and every attempt that I've made. They've been accessible, available. They've fairly and accurately reported everything. I get a sense that the journalists are anti-UFC, that they don't like the way the UFC conducts their business. They see how they intimidate the fighters, how they give the fighters mere breadcrumbs. And I think that the journalists that cover the MMA have been nothing more than supportive for me, and I appreciate everything they've done. I appreciate you giving me a voice and having me on your show.
Yeah, definitely, of course. Quickly, I think also, just recently, just today, an article was put out by MMAfighting.com. They've done a brilliant job of covering the UFC Union efforts as well. But they just put out that I guess another group is forming, and they're supposed to be having an announcement this week, I think Wednesday or Thursday, and they kind of did some name dropping with George St. Pierre, Cain Velasquez, TJ Dillashaw, Donald Cerrone, Bjorn Rebney. I don't know if you've heard of this, and if you have, what are your thoughts about that?
I have heard of it, and I'm wondering myself. It sounds to me like they're going to be another competing union. Mm-hmm. And that's what it sounds like to me. Now, I might be wrong. I don't know, but I guess I'll learn about it when everybody else learns about it.
Sure. And so, before it was just the MMAFA and the PFA, and so let's say there is Party C that joins, the conversation. It's already the whole idea of the union. It's implied within the name to unite. So what's the strategy there? Let's say, okay, they come out, they have this press conference on Wednesday, and they say, we are announcing that we're, starting X, Y, and Z union efforts. Where do you go in terms of now having to, before it was with the MMAFA, and I think that your stance there was pretty clear, at least from my opinion, that the MMAFA was trying to establish, efforts across MMA, and it was not company specific, whereas the PFA would be UFC specific, as well as the MMAFA is it's not a union, I think is what you were saying. It's an association, not a union, or wouldn't be required to become a union. So if these guys come into the picture and they actually are head-to-head competing with the PFA, what's the plan of action?
Yeah, the MMAFA, right, it's an association, it's not a union. They represent players in different promotions. They represent retired guys. So it's different. They don't need to be certified by the NLRB, the National Labor Relations Board. The PFA does.
Right.
I don't know what announcement CAA is going to make. It's all speculation. So
sure.
I guess I can't comment on it until I know for sure. And if their answer is they're a union competing with me, then so be it. I'll see what their ideals are, their philosophies, their policies, and I'll comment on it when I see it. But it could be something completely different. I don't know.
Right. That's fair. Well, yeah. Well, Jeff, we're thankful that you got to come on. We're obviously, like I said, we're here to support the fighters at the end of the day, and when we support the fighters, then they have the best situation. They're able to put on the best performances, and that's really what we want at the end of the day. So it's unfortunate that Leslie and Lucas are no longer with the PFA. Hopefully, do you feel like there's any opportunity for those relationships to be mended?
I don't need to have them mended because the people that I have on board right now, I don't know how I could put this, but I think have more influence, more stature, and although I can't mention any names, I'm proud of the people who are backing it right now, and I'll go to battle with what I got currently in place. Understood.
Well, we are definitely still in support, again, and I know, are you guys still planning to put together the fighters board?
Yes.
Okay. Well, we'll be here for you guys when you're ready to announce that, and we'll definitely love to have you back on.
I appreciate you having me on the show, Kalah.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Jeff.
Thank you.
All right, bye. That was interesting. Ladies and gentlemen, that was Jeff Borris of the Professional Fighters Association. If you want to follow Jeff Borris, you can follow him at, let's see, I think it's Fighters Assoc. Let's see, 1 second. Yeah, at Fighters Assoc. So, okay, hold on. I need to break some of this down. Interesting interview. I'm trying to remain impartial, but I think I can understand where Jeff is coming from in the sense that, if you're a doctor, right, and you have a patient who comes in and is like, "Doctor, I'm feeling sick. I'm experiencing a fever. I've been throwing up, blah, 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 whatever." And he's like, "Oh, you have the flu." And, someone who's not a doctor says, "No, they have, I don't know, something else." And as a doctor, you're just kind of maybe offended or perplexed as to why someone who doesn't have the same credentials as you is combating your input or your experience. And so on a professional slash I don't know what the word is, but to me it kind of has a bit of a I just think that in the sport of MMA, okay, let me just say this in general. I think that when you're dealing with people, whether in a professional or in just a regular social or relationship situation, you have to treat people with respect. Even if, let's say that doctor is like, he knows he's right, or she knows she's right, and is being challenged by something or someone else, this is all a part of the educational experience. You don't just shut somebody down and then make executive decisions, because that's how you create divisiveness. That's how you create factions. Instead, you take the time, although it may seem redundant or a waste of time maybe in that person's eyes, to sit down, because I think at the end of the day, if you see that person as valuable, you see taking the time to explain something or come to common ground, you see that as being worthwhile. But what I'm seeing is that even at the end, Jeff mentioned, I said, well, is there any way that you can mend the relationship? Because at the end of the day, business, whether or not you feel like that person is indispensable or not, always comes back around. I don't know if I don't believe in karma, but the concepts of reciprocity, of things just kind of coming back around where you don't really expect it to, that always happens. And so I would just caution Jeff, perhaps, that to not make these different people seem indispensable, because that's what it kind of sounded like. Towards the end, I said, is there any way for you to mend the relationship with Leslie and Lucas? And basically, he even kind of was like saying, I don't know how to say this in a nice way, but they're indispensable. They're dispensable. Sorry, not indispensable. They are dispensable. They are accessory. They're not fundamental to the success of this organization, which, ooh, that's not nice. So, and I think the other thing too is when you are trying to garner support for an organization or for people to follow you, just leadership 101, you make everyone feel valued. And I think that when you have set the precedent of you are dispensable, you don't matter, your opinion doesn't matter, I have all the answers, it can create a culture of yes men, and it doesn't leave room for people to be creative in the way that they think about how to go about, figuring out a solution for the union, right? And now as we see this has kind of been the perfect storm in a lot of ways. And in no way am I really trying to harp on this, but I'm just kind of stating the facts that here in a matter of a week, we had Leslie on last week, which we'll post that episode in the description so you guys can go back and check it out. But last week, Monday, we had Leslie on the show. She basically drops a bomb, is like, I'm revoking my endorsement of the PFA, blah, blah, blah. What she said is that Jeff has done some stuff behind the scenes that the rest of us were not aware of, and breached confidentiality. And then today, or I think it was today, she releases this open letter to anyone that she has personally introduced Jeff to, in terms of soliciting them to be a part of the PFA. And then also today comes out this article by Mark Ramundi from MMAfighting.com, who basically writes this article talking about maybe the potential, a third union being formed, or organization vying for the opportunity to be a union. And so it's just not a great situation for the PFA right now, for Jeff Borris and the folks over at the PFA. And like he said, and we don't know right now who all is a part of the fighters board that's going to be getting formed. But as of now, we only knew of Leslie. And so in terms of what we were talking about, speculation, that's all we had was Leslie. And she was a great representative, in my opinion. She spoke well. I don't agree with the comment about her. She was more known from her participation with the PFA rather than her merit inside the octagon. I think that's a bit of a slight. However, regardless, she's been doing an amazing job, and so I think even just to give credit where credit is due, again, going back to Leadership 101, can't burn bridges. And MMA is such a tight-knit sport and community and people don't forget. Like, that's the other part. Like, especially because we have these awesome, like, podcasts and different shows, and we have YouTube, and everything is so easily accessible, and clips can get brought up on a split second. I think it's important to remember that people, at the end of the day, we're all people, and we all have in a lot of ways, we all have the same goals. And so to respect that, and to respect people in a way that they can support you, even if you have differing opinions on how things should go. So, man, there you have it. Jeff Borris from the Professional Fighters Association. Guys, this is I'm interested to see what 2017 is going to look like, because this completely changed my mind as to how next year is going to go. I just saw another article that actually Lucas Middlebrook tweeted out, saying there was an article. Oh, where was it? I don't remember where it is, but basically mentioning that the next UFC contract for its media rights is going to be going out, the contract will end with Fox in 2018. That is, when did they sign that contract? Like mid to early 2011. So let's say a year and a half from now, the UFC will be signing a new media contract. What the articles talked about was they're hoping to get a contract that'll be worth 4 times as much as the current UFC media contract. The current one is $115 million a year. They're hoping to get $450 million a year for a 10-year contract. So we're talking $450 million over the span of 10 years. It's time to get a union going, because let's just say, like, we have to look at this we have to like schedule this out retroactively. So if we said, let's say July 2018 is when the UFC is going to sign their next contract, they've got to work quickly, because the unions, if there's now going to be a third-party competition, let's say the PFA, let's just say, for argument's sake, let's just say it's the PFA and the Union X over here competing. So now they have to like go through an entire competition process. When it comes to a vote, they're going to have to go ahead and get those cards signed, and yeah, everything comes to a vote. You can see it all in Leslie's letter, how all of that will work out. And then finally, when one of those two groups actually gets chosen by the NLRB as the UFC Union, then they can start working on negotiating on behalf of the fighters. And so, like, when do you think that's going to happen? I'm thinking, like, the best would have to be, like, 6 months from now. So June 2017, May 2017, so that they can get in the position to start having conversations, well, to where the NLRB will force the UFC to have conversations with the representing party. So I'm just thinking, like, I don't know, 6 months, is that enough time? And so now they're going to start, I think the main objective on that, if whoever is chosen or whoever is voted in as the unified UFC Union, they are going to have the TV deal, the TV rights deal, at the top of the list in terms of what to start negotiating on right away, because they're only going to have a year after that and that's what the article said as well, is that the negotiations for the next deal, the next TV rights deal, is going to start in 2017. So, and the UFC knows all this. That's the other thing. They know that time is against the unions, right? And so if I were the UFC and if I didn't care about fighters and I just cared about my bottom line, I would push the negotiations as fast as possible, and get the best deal as quickly as possible, so that it's not. And I wonder, like, after everything is signed, is it just set in stone, even if a union is formed after that deal is done? I'm really curious. I need to ask more questions about that. I need to learn a little bit more about how that works out, or if fighters can still get a chunk or a percentage of what the UFC is going to get paid even after that deal is done. So it's important times. And a tweet that I sent out earlier was saying that, let's say you have, let's say we have like 550 fighters on the UFC roster at any given time, especially during these negotiations. And let's say, they get $450 million a year, what they're asking for. And so you divide that, let's say that they're able to negotiate 40% of that deal for the fighters. So That's $180 million a year divided by 550 fighters. That's $327,000 on average per fighter. And I don't know if they'd split it up equally amongst all the fighters, but even still, that is way more than most fighters in the UFC will make in 3 or 4 fights just in 1 year. Especially the bottom entry-level fighters. That's money that cannot be afforded, that those low-level and mid-level fighters, and I would even argue that a lot of the higher-level fighters, that's money they are not willing to leave on the table. That's money that pays for training camps. That's money that pays for weight cutters, or people that help you cut your weight. That's money that pays for nutritionists. That's money that helps you pay for a car that actually helps you get to the gym. That's money that helps you pay for rent, because there are a lot of fighters out there still that live in like random accommodations made by the gym. These are professional athletes. They need to be treated as such. They need to be paid as such so that they can have the resources necessary. They need to have massage therapists. I mean, you think about what college athletes have. College athletes are treated, and let's just be honest, when TJ Dillashaw said that he felt like he got treated better as a college athlete at, I forget what school he went to. Did he go to Sac State, where he wrestled in college? Better than what he felt like he was being offered at Team Alpha Male. And, you know, this is no knock on Team Alpha Male, but in general, I would say that college athletes, you think about football players, basketball players, baseball players, soccer players, they get treated way better than professional MMA fighters on average, especially the lower tier guys. So we're talking about elevating the sport so that everything rises when you treat your athletes right. And then you have less of these situations, hopefully, with UFC 206 card getting destroyed because Daniel Cormier, you know, and I don't know, he has the resources. That's the other thing. He has the resources to get the nutritionists and all that stuff to help him take care of his body. But I think a lot less, if you can start to train your fighters in their earlier years as professional athletes, how to train, how to take care of their bodies so that the risk of fighters dropping out of these fights, these big main headline cards, is less, that's better for everybody's bottom line. And that's an investment that any good business person always invests back into their company. And if you're only looking to suck the juice out of it and not provide anything back, then you're going to suck it dry and it's not going to have any value for you at the end of the day. The grass is greener where you water it. Okay. But quickly, just to go back, UFC 206 got destroyed, as we all know. Daniel Cormier got injured. His pelvis, hip, groin area got pulled in training. He's off the card. Anthony Johnson has decided not to take a fight with Gegard Mousasi because he wants to make sure he still has the opportunity to fight for the belt when DC is ready to return. Okay, so we know that. So what the UFC decided to do as their solution was they took Conor McGregor's featherweight title and stripped it. They said that Conor McGregor has relinquished, quote, his title, his 145-pound title. And as a result of that, Jose Aldo is now the undisputed featherweight champion. And then in order to save the card, they basically created an interim title on the line between Max Holloway and Anthony Pettis. And it's funny because when I first learned about this on, what's today, Monday? So I learned about this 2 days ago maybe. I was just like, this is so stupid. Why? I said I'm literally interim belt fatigued. Because they just make up these random reasons as to why people need an interim title. Just make it the number one contender fight. Or, wait, was Jose Aldo available to fight for at UFC 206 against Max Holloway? You know, these are all, it's just becoming irritating. and it's becoming annoying. Actually, let's just call it what it is. It's annoying. And as a fan, it's just like, it's selling wolf tickets. You're making it hyped up more than what it is. And it's already hyped up. Like, it's already an amazing fight. Who wouldn't want to see the former champion, UFC champion, Anthony Pettis, go against the up-and-coming 24-year-old Max Holloway, who barely lost to McGregor? The only loss that he's had. I think it's the only loss that he's had, at least recently. And then he's been on like a 7-fight win streak since then, knocking guys silly. So, yeah, it's just like, this is just corporate. And it makes me wonder, it really made me wonder, was that a decision? Is this something that's different under the new WME era versus the Zuffa era? Because to be honest, I kind of wonder, and I'm like, I don't know that this decision would have been made under the Fertitta era. I'm not as, maybe, honestly, that definitely could have happened. But, and I know they like to have title fights for like their pay-per-view cards, but I don't know. This seems it seems a little bit different, and it seems a bit corporate. So that's pretty much it, guys. I'm like, we'll see what happens in 2017. Excited. You still have UFC 207 to look forward to. So, and UFC 206 is going to be it's going to still be a really good card. It's just all the politics. That's annoying. All the politics. I can't wait to see what Conor McGregor has to say. Because when the king speaks, everybody listens. So, isn't that right, Josh?
You mean the queen?
Oh, gosh. Yes. And then they're about to have this little Prince baby McGregor soon. That's so cute. Oh. So, Black Friday, nobody died. That's good. But I did hear all these crazy stories every year, right? It's like people, Amazon, online shopping, free 2-day shipping. Why even go outside? Who goes outside anymore anyways? Everybody's on their phone inside, on their computers, right? Best Buy had a great deal, so I got a good new laptop, and I'm going to learn how to... Ladies, okay, this is something that I need to mention. Ladies, I feel like a lot of times guys are good at a lot of technical kind of stuff. And so 2017 is going to be the year that I know how to do my own editing and all that good stuff. And I'd encourage you that if you have any of your own projects to, know all ins and outs of how to do it. And obviously Josh is great. Josh does an amazing job for us here at Girl Fight Talk, but I think sometimes you gotta know how to do stuff for yourself and not be vulnerable to just your own ignorance of not knowing how to do stuff. So 2017, make it the year to DIY, do it yourself, know how to do stuff for yourself, for your business, so that you're not dependent, like let's say Josh is sick, right? And I need to get my videos out. I got to do it for myself. So, Josh is like, job security. But, that's it, guys. I hope you have a good week. It's Monday. It's a good start to the week. I'll definitely be tweeting out about the, announcement that gets made by George. I think that's it. Girl Fight Talk, at Girl Fight Talk. I'm your host, Kalah Haley. Usually I do that at the beginning, but I did it at the end. Subscribe and retweet all my stuff on Twitter, okay? Because I'm pretty awesome. All right. See you guys next week.